So at this point, starting the second quarter, we have to have students each period be on the lathe to start working on the handles for their drawers. I do want you guys to have exposure using the lathe because for some people this is a revolution, or a revelation I should say, that now they're using something to spin a project, and it's a little bit more artsy, it's a little bit more analog, it's you can kind of do what you want on here. It's you have a little bit more interpretation here. So for the larger 2-drawer case that some students are doing, we have a larger handle that we're going to use for that because there's only 2 handles on that. For the smaller one, or the smaller drawers that have 6 drawers on them, we're going to use a smaller handle. So these are the 2 size handles that we're going to have in here. This is the profile for this one here. It sits on there, just like that. Okay? So I want to talk about how we're starting these up. I have already milled out some 1x1 material out of maple. Maple is a really nice wood to turn on the lathe because maple is kind of like clay. It does a nice job of holding corners without chipping edges. Not all wood is created equal when using a wood lathe to make it on. Oak, ash, very grainy, very easy to chip out. Some woods are very soft, easy to break, easy to snap. Maple turns out to be a great wood to turn on the lathe. So we're going to put it into this 4-jawed chuck here, and we're going to have it so that the corners are tucked into where the jaws meet. And we have an Allen wrench here that starts this up. So as you bring it in, I want you to keep it centered. So kind of be moving it around until it finds where it wants to be. Hold it tight against. And then when you go ahead and lock this, I want you to lock this with some force. You want to hold this thing in here tightly. All right. Once we have one in here, we're not going to take it out until it is finished. It's very tough to find the center again. So this is 1 inch thick here. Our piece is 11/16. So the diameter of our piece is 11/16. So it's a little bit larger than, or a little bit smaller than this. 1 inch is 16/16. So in the process of making this thing round, we're going to be removing a fair amount of material, but we have enough material that if this thing is sitting a little bit awkward in here, and let's take a look and see if it is. I'll bring it way down, you can see. It's got a little bit of a bounce to it, so maybe it's not sitting flat in the back there, but we're going to turn this down to whatever the center is at the angle that it's at here. That means that putting it back in again, it might shift and sit at a little bit of a different angle, so you have to do it all in one go here. So we're not going to start with 5 minutes left in the period. You should have, I would say, 20 minutes if you're just beginning this to be able to try to get one done. This is our tool rest. Our tool rest wants to sit just below center of this, and it wants to sit about 1/8 of an inch away. So I'm gonna, on the back side here, without turning it on, I can rotate this and see that it's not going to hit my tool rest. You can also get an idea by doing this about how off center this piece is when I'm rotating it on the tool rest here. Bring your little camera around here and show this. So when I rotate this, you can see there it's about 3/16 away, there it's about 1/8 away, there it's about 1/16 away. As it rotates, a little bit different on each side, so it's not sitting perfectly parallel with my tool rest, but it will be eventually here. So I want to turn this thing down to a diameter of 11/16, the entire thing. And I'm going to be using an 11/16 wrench to check that size. Okay, so first thing I want to do is to make it round. I'm going to start off by using this tool here, which is a gouge. This is the larger of the 2 gouges. There are 2 that I have here. Not the same size. I'm going to use the larger one. And that's going to help me rough the diameter. I'm going to start off at around 600 RPM. And I adjust this analog. It just rotates for me to get the corners off of this. So my speed, I'm going to pull my fence down so that it doesn't jump up and hit me. And I'm just taking the corners off. I am. So you can see there's still a flat here. There's still a flat here, so I have a ways to go. And once I get this area flat, I'll go back in and try to clean this up a little bit on this side as well. But now that I have it pretty round, I'm going to go up from 600 to about 800 RPM. So now it's completely round. It's not very uniform right now though, huh? It will be. This is a skew. Has the angle on it, and it looks like a double-edged chisel. I'm gonna use this to get my diameter uniform. And I'll bring it now to about 1,000 RPM, 1,200 RPM. So it looks uniform now. But by the way, the method that I'm using to cut this is called the shaving. So I'm just holding the piece out flat, just shaving off the material. That is not the way a very good wood turner would do it. A good wood turner would have their blade turned to be making cuts like this as they're going across. So it'd be kind of shaving it at a skew. That's why it's called that. I mean, this thing, very honestly, the way we're using it could just sit straight out flat and go that way. It's supposed to be held at an angle like that. The reason that I don't teach it that way is because students get frustrated very often because this very easily gets caught into the material and it'll ruin the piece that they've just spent 15 minutes on. Shaving it, not as nice a result if you're using really sharp tools, but you get less of what I just mentioned, okay? So I want to get it to 11/16, so now I'll get my wrench. And you can see I'm not there yet. So I've used a gouge, a skew, and I'm now going to use what's called a parting tool. So a parting tool is used to go in and create the diameter that we need. Now I'm just going to do it at a random spot here on my piece. I'm going to hold my wrench back here against this as it turns, and I'm going to cut into the material, and I'm going to be moving my parting tool back and forth to help clear material. So now my wrench is back there. I'm moving back and forth to give myself a wide enough place for the wrench to seat itself. I'll even go a little bit wider. And once the wrench drops on like it is now, I'm at 11/16. Okay? Now I'm going to use the skew to make everything else. I'll use the gouge first to get everything pretty close to that same diameter. So I'm watching the diameter that I create with the skew, with the parting tool, and trying to come close to it. Now I'll use the skew to make everything the same diameter as the parting tool made it. You want to watch that you don't whack your knuckles on this. It is spinning around, spinning in this direction. So we're working close in proximity to where our hands are. Looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm 11/16 diameter here, and I'm pretty uniform the whole way. All right, next, on the front of that, I have a round, and that round is 1/8 of an inch. So I'm gonna hold this card, and can you see right over top now to see where I'm at here? I'm gonna hold that card so that this part is to the front there. Then I'm gonna make my mark where that point goes to. Okay, I'm gonna spin it around so my pencil's right at that mark there. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the machine on. Now let's go ahead and make that more clear for myself. It's kind of like that spin art that you see sometime at like carnivals and fairs that the kids drop the ink on. But anyways, so now I'm gonna bring my tool rest closer. If you look, you'll see my tool rest is probably about a ½ inch away during this time. I'm gonna bring it over, and I'm gonna bring it to about 1/8 of an inch within my project. Okay, now I'm gonna turn the front of this. I'm putting pressure against that end as I'm doing that. So I have the front turned now. Right? Looks good. So next thing I want to do is I want to come back behind this about yo far away from it. And I want to turn to my second diameter there. My second diameter is going to be 9/16. So the wrenches that I need for this are an 11/16, now a 9/16, and eventually a 5/16. So now I'm going to go back and I am going to cut into that with the parting tool and go down to my 9/16. When I lay my hand on here, I want to make sure my arm across this, that my clothing is not getting into this rotation. My clothing is also not getting into that back handle rotation that we manually turned this with earlier. So I have that held on there. So now that fits my 9/16. So I'm going to turn that whole back side to that diameter there. I'll use a small gouge to begin with here. If I find where I put it. Here it is. Now that I'm close, I'll go to my skew again. I'll cut it all down to the same diameter. So now I am at 9/16 down here, a little bit thick right there, but that's okay. So you see where we're going with this. Now I'm going to go ahead and take my pattern again. And I'm going to mark where it goes back to. So my front is at the right spot, that's held. My curve goes back to right here. So my curve comes from here to there. So this whole shaded part in here is going to get curved. Right? So that's going to look like this. To do this, we're going to use a nose shaving cutter. I'm holding it so the flat side's facing up. And then my middle diameter, I just went ahead and I set a pair of calipers to that diameter there. So that's where I'm headed. I want to be able to fit that over top, and it looks like it's already there. Okay. Next, I want to cut the back side so it fits through the hole in the front of my my project. So I'm going to use my skew again, and I'm going to cut a line right here. See how I'm holding the skew not flat this time, but I'm holding it on edge. Cut a little angle there. And I'm just going to cut back because I don't want to break that corner. I want that corner to stay strong. So I'm going to cut back from that. And again, I'm going to use my parting tool so I can get down to 5/16. What diameter is the most important? 5/16. Why? Because we're going to drill a hole 5/16 and it's going to get glued in the front of your drawer, and if it doesn't fit that 5/16 exactly, it's not going to work. I'm going to move to a smaller skew now. So I had the larger skew I used before. Now I'm going to use a smaller skew, and I'm going to take the rest of this out. So I'm not putting too much pressure on any one spot. I'm going to kind of chew away at it. Then I'm going to come into that back side of that line that I cut, and I'm going to back cut it. Check it again with my 5/16. Still a little bit tight, so I'm going to go a little more. Fits pretty nicely there. Okay, it has friction. So it's not as pretty as it's going to be, and I got a little chip out there. But now I'm going to go back and I'm going to move my tool rest. And I'm going to get some sandpaper. And now without the tool rest there, because I can bust my fingers, you will never be touching this when there's a tool rest there. If this sucks your finger down in between the tool rest and the piece, it can break your finger. But when the tool rest is gone, I have more freedom here. I'm going to round that out a little bit so I can get rid of that ding that I saw. And very honestly, they're so quick to make, I would probably get rid of this one and use a different one if that ding remains there. Okay, so there's that one now, and I would use this one because the ding's not bad. Maybe face that down on the handle so it's not as visible. Take my Allen wrench, remove this. There's my handle. Okay, that's going to go into a 5/16 hole, and now in the future, I would make it look at this because it looks like the one is much larger diameter. My first one I did not take all the way to 11/16. I didn't have the wrench out at that point. I was just trying to see if I had the process down, and it's too big. It doesn't fit. So when you have the wrenches, it's going to keep much more uniform size.